Saints Seahawks, let's go ahead and preview this thing. Let's go ahead and take a look at the betting odds. We're going to break it down from a betting perspective and from a fan perspective. So this is an interesting game because there's so much more than what just is happening on the field. First of all, let's look at the line itself. So as of right now, the Saints are at home -5. The over-under is 45. Now, this line's kind of moved all over the place. So it opened at 4. All right, it opens at 4, immediately gets bet up to like 5.5. It slowly drops down to 5, 5.5, kind of wiggles in between there for the rest of the week. Now, it was at 5.5, and jameis Winston was officially ruled out, and then Andy Dalton was starting. Now, I think that's a positive for the Saints. I think that's a benefit. I think the Saints should have been starting Andy Dalton anyways, but the market has reacted negatively, which has pushed the line back to 5.5. I have a hard time believing it's going to fall further than that. I think 5 is probably the best you're going to get. And if you think about it too, the difference between 5 and 4.5, not very much. So there's no way it drops to 4. So if you're interested in the Saints, I would go ahead and take it now, just to make sure that something crazy doesn't happen and it doesn't fly up to 6 or 5.5 before kickoff. I don't think it will. It may be one of those like moves to 5.5, move to 4.5, but it's not going to move much. So I would just go ahead and take it here if you're interested. As far as the over-under, sitting at 45. So let's go ahead and look at DVOA and all that stuff, and then we'll kind of get into this. So let's look at defense first. So let's do pass defense. Remember, guys, negative is better, positive is worse. So the pass defense, Seattle has the worst pass defense in the league. I think Seattle, because they beat Detroit, I think people think, oh, well, that must mean Detroit is the worst team or worst defense in the NFL. It's important to remember that Detroit, and we'll look at this when we look at the schedules, it's important to remember that Detroit put up, 40 points on a Seattle team when they didn't have their best receiver, they didn't have their best running back. You know, Detroit was void of playmakers. It was basically just Hawkinson and Goff lighting that ass up for 40 points. So Seattle, worst pass defense in the league, and their rush defense is slightly below average, we'll say. The Saints, on the other hand, they have the let's see, 1, 2, 3. Okay, they have the 13th best pass defense and the number. I thought they were actually better against the run, and the number 13 run defense. So two pretty good defense. Let's just compare that to Detroit, just so we know. So to compare that against Detroit has the 24th worst pass defense and the number 1 worst rush defense. All right, so that's important. It's important because Seattle is coming from playing that team, right? They're coming from playing that team. And now they're playing the Saints, who are very good defensively, above average to good defensively. And they're playing them on the road in New Orleans. So let's go ahead and look at the offensive rankings. Go here, bop. All right, so passing offense, Seattle is 3 again. That is against Detroit, and I think they played Atlanta. So Detroit weighs heavy here. The Saints are the 24th. Rushing offense, the Seahawks are 8th, and New Orleans is 9. Okay, so that's where we are DVOA wise. So let's go ahead and look at, we'll do the injury report and all that stuff. Now, why I said that it's important, or this game is interesting for things off the field. This is a crazy spot for the Saints. All right, this is an insane spot for the Saints. Let's go ahead and look at the Saints schedule here. So the Saints go at Carolina. All right, so they play on the road to Carolina. Then they turn around. We know, as we talked about this last week, they play Carolina and turn around and go immediately to London to play the Vikings. The Saints spent the entire week in London. They didn't go late like the Vikings did. They spent the whole week. So virtually they've been on the road for 2 weeks and are coming home now. Or they've been home. But it's basically a 2-week road stand, one of which was in London. All right, so we play Seattle and then Cincinnati the following week. So it's not... The Cincinnati game's obviously a bigger game, but I don't think it's not a look-ahead spot. There's no problem there. The problem, and that the interesting part, which you'll note here, is that there isn't a bye week. Okay, there isn't a bye week here in between the London comeback and the next game. Now, when that has happened, I believe I have the statistic correct. When that has happened, because most of the time teams take buys, but the Saints did not. Whenever a team does not take the bye, I believe in every situation that has happened. So this is important. Every time a team has played the following week after coming back from London without taking a bye, every single time that team, in this situation the Saints, has been trailing or tied going into the fourth quarter. All right, so they've struggled. They've struggled. And we have VSiN pulled up here. I believe VSiN has some trends. Here we are. So teams that have played in London opted out of an early bye. Those teams so it's only 5 out of 60 times it's happened. Those teams are 2-3 straight up and 2-1 against the spread. So nothing crazy. It's not, because you would think it'd be awful, right? You would think, man, this is terrible. The Saints doing this themselves. There's no way they're going to have legs. But as you can see, it's not too bad. 2-3 straight up and 2-1 against the spread really isn't that nuts. So that's just one of those things that is in the back of my mind, but small sample size, but maybe it's not as big of a deal as I'm making it. So let's look at the Saints' schedule. So the Saints, miracle win against against Atlanta. They lose to Tampa at home, lose to Carolina on the road, switch to Dalton. Now, Dalton plays in London without Alvin Kamara. Leading rusher is a guy who's not even on the team anymore, without Michael Thomas. And they really should have at least went to overtime. Played really well against Minnesota, who people consider a playoff team, a really good team. So this is the Minnesota game shows a little bit of life to New Orleans. Now, if we go to them boys in Seattle, Seattle has played Denver, who we know sucks, San Francisco, who's really good, Atlanta, below average, and Detroit. All right. Now, this is also something that I think people are really making a big deal about. So Geno, as you've heard, Geno is God, right? Geno is the greatest quarterback of all time. People are already comparing him, saying that the Seahawks won the Russell Wilson trade, whatever. It's important to note here, Denver, okay, played really well in the first half. Absolutely no doubt about that. They didn't score in the second half, okay? They did not score in the second half here. So let's continue along their schedule. So then they play the Niners, okay? They don't score at all. The 7 points is from a blocked field goal. So now we're on to 6 straight quarters without a point. 6 straight quarters without a point. Now, granted, this is the Niners. They are good, but still. So 6 straight quarters, no points there. All right? So then we go. I'm moving all over the place. Sorry, guys. So then we go to the Falcons. All right, we look at the Falcons. They score. Boom, boom. All right. 20 points in the first half. 3 points in the second half. So again, now we've had 6 straight quarters. So we've had 8 quarters. 8 out of 10 quarters here. So they play a stretch of 10. Those are quick math. They play a stretch of 10 quarters where in 8 of those quarters, they score a combined 3 points. And that's a field goal. Okay, so 8 out of 10 field goal, or 8 out of 10 quarters, they are scoreless. As far as Geno, putting the ball in the end zone. That's important. Okay, I know it was convoluted getting there. We took a trip getting there, but it's important that while we are hearing how great Geno is playing, that 80% of the quarters he played in that stretch, he did not get a touchdown. All right, that's you have to be there. Okay, so that's the Atlanta game. So we've already confirmed that Denver first half was good, second half was not. 49ers the entire game was not good. Second half of the Falcons not good. Then they play the Lions, who we just talked about have the worst defense in the NFL. So I believe that you have a very inflated view of Geno Smith and a very inflated view of the Seahawks. And the Seahawks, look, Seattle to New Orleans ain't no trip next door. Okay, I know the Saints just came back from London, but Seattle to New Orleans is a long way. And they're playing in the morning. Okay, so we got a body clock issue. All that stuff. In Seattle, West Coast time, playing the early game Central. Now, it's not as bad as playing on the East or in the Eastern time zone, but Central's still something to think about. All right, so that's how I'm viewing this game. I'm viewing this game where these two teams are right now. I'm viewing this. Okay, VSiN is showing that the line is at 4.5. We were using Caesars there. We'll update and see if it's moved. So it's still at 5. So this must be like a consensus or something like that. We can look at that. But so they're showing 4.5. But so I'm looking at this like the Saints are coming off of a loss, but looked pretty good. The Seahawks are coming off of a win, and people think they're way better than they are. I don't think the Seahawks are good. I don't think Geno Smith is good. I know that the media is going to tell you they're good. I know the media is going to tell you that Geno is having this wonderful story and this renaissance season and whatever. I'm here to tell you he's not. I'm here to tell you he's not that good. So what I think is going to happen is I think the Saints are going to put it on the Seahawks. I think that Andy Dalton is the better quarterback for the Saints. Alvin Kamara is supposed to play. We'll go ahead and look at the injuries. Alvin Kamara is supposed to play. Go to the Saints. Michael Thomas is out. All right, he's out. Throckmorton is out. Peyton Turner is out. PJ Williams is out. Jameis is out too. So Kamara is supposed to play, and Landry is questionable. Thomas isn't playing. Apparently, Thomas's toe is kind of serious, and so if Kamara plays, virtually it's the same offense against Minnesota that I think was pretty good, plus Alvin Kamara. Okay, so that's strong for the Saints. Seahawks, Rashad Penny is probable, so nothing too insane here to look at. All right, so let's look at, this is another thing to think about. Okay, so the Seahawks were playing the Lions. All right, the line opened up, I believe 6. I believe the line opened 6 and dropped to 3 because of all the injuries for Detroit. So the Saints are playing at home. So it's virtually, they're saying that the Lions are a little bit better than the Saints. I'm not sure if that's true. I'm really not. So that's something else to think about, is how they're kind of viewing those two. Because if the Lions opened up 5.5, 6, I have to go back and check that. I'm pretty sure they opened up at like 5.5. And the Saints opened up at 4. That's telling you something there too, ladies and gentlemen. It is. Let's see. They played at the Niners. That doesn't really count, because the Niners are way better than the Saints. So that's where we are. So as far as the game, all right, so let's talk about betting. Let's talk about what I would do. I would not take the Seahawks here. Here's something else to think about when you're betting. All right, so this is something I stress to people all the time. If you are willing to take the Saints -5, you have to ask yourself, would I be willing to take the Saints -6? Because 5 is such an unusual number. The chances of the game landing 5 are very small. So in reality, this is pretty much 6. 6 is a much more common landing spot. So this if you aren't comfortable with the Saints -6, you can't be comfortable with the Saints -5. It's the same as if the line was 4.5. If the line was 4.5, you better be comfortable taking 5.5, because they're the same, right? You see what I'm saying? So people kind of mix that up, where just because it's a tick down, you got to look at the rarity of the landing. So I think the Saints, if the Saints were sitting at 6, I think that's right around where I have the game. I don't think the Seahawks are going to score very much. I think the Saints at home with that time slot, a very good defense, a huge step up in competition as far as defensively from what the Seahawks have been doing. I think all that leads to the Saints shutting down Geno Smith and shutting down that Seahawks offense. Now, here's the question. Should Andy Dalton and the Saints be giving up 6 points to anybody? Because to cover a line like that, you have to be very confident that team can get margin, that team can extend the lead. So how are they going to extend the lead? Like, so it's a 45-point game. All right, so they're expecting somewhere in the neighborhood of like 26-20, right? 24-20, somewhere in there. 17-24, 17-27, so somewhere in there. Like that's the ballpark. So all those numbers, do I think this? Am I confident? Am I comfortable with the Saints scoring between 21 and 28 points? If I told you the Saints scored 28 points, would you take the Saints -5? I would. because I'd be thinking, all right, well, if the Saints scored 28 points, I don't think the Saints are going to give up 23 points to the Seahawks. Who's a better offense, the Seahawks right now or Tampa when Tampa came to New Orleans? Because Tampa was held to 20 points. So I think that's where my mind is. In my mind, my mind's eye, I'm looking at like I could see somewhere in the neighborhood of that 26 to 26-17 kind of world, 26-13. Because you got to think too, there's another thing with bad quarterbacks. So it's easy to say like numbers that go with 7. So it's easy to be like, okay, the Saints will score 3 touchdowns, the Seahawks will score 3 touchdowns, the score will be 28-21. Well, when you have bad quarterbacks or bad offenses, a lot of the times the red zone touchdowns turn to field goals. So I think the Seahawks will kick, if they are in the red, let's say they're in the red zone 4 times, I would assume 2 of those are going to be field goals, right? Saints, same way. If the Saints are in the red zone 5 times, at least 2 are field goals. So that's how I came up with like a 26-17 kind of thing. 26-13, somewhere in there, where it's a lot of field goals, a couple touchdowns. So if, gun to my head, right now what I have ticket-wise is I have the Saints on a teaser. So I have the Saints teased down, and I cross 0, but sue me, all right? So I have the Saints plus, because I got it earlier in the week, I have the Saints plus a half. Yeah, 6-point teaser. I had them when it was 5.5. So I have the Saints plus a half, and I have them tied to Green Bay and Tampa. And this was earlier in the week, so I have Green Bay plus or -2 and Tampa -2.5. I will be in the dome. I'll be sucking down Bloody Marys and crowning Sprites. I may get a slice of the Saints -5. I may get a piece of that. I may get a piece of like, I'd be looking at the field goal prop. It's usually over 3.5, somewhere in there. I'd be looking at the, let's see if they have it. Because what is going on here? Why can't I look? What the hell is this? Because I would be looking at things like the no score in the first 5.5 minutes. I think the game will be slow. I think the game will be, trying to get Kamara involved, a lot of running from both sides. The Seahawks like to run. I think you're going to see a lot of defense, a lot. Again, both these teams should be tired. Both these teams should be traveled, pretty good. So two kind of tired teams, two kind of teams trying not to make mistakes. I don't think it's going to be a shootout. I don't think Andy Dalton's going to go try and get in a shootout with Geno Smith. So that's kind of where my mind goes to this game. I don't think I would mess with the over-under. That does kind of seem like a lot of points, not going to lie. It's interesting because I believe the Tampa Bay Chiefs game from last Sunday night, I believe that total, I think, was like 45 or 47. And it's crazy to think that game could have a total around there when this game has Geno Smith and the Saints. So maybe I should be looking more at the under. Maybe this game more is like a 20 to 13 kind of game, 23-13, somewhere in there. And maybe the under, maybe the under is worth a look. I wouldn't play the over, and I wouldn't take the Seahawks because +5 is just not what I need. So I would, again, I don't have a ticket on that right now, but I would look at those two. As far as props, dangerous to play props because you don't know what kind of state Kamara is going to be in. You don't want to take Kamara overs because if he's questionable, plays, gets hit, gets taken out, you don't want to be on the hook for that. I might look Chris Olave because he got so much action against the Vikings. I may look there, so I may take a look, especially if the Seahawks pass defense is that bad. It might be like an Olave, reception prop or something like that. As far as they're not going to have like big player props up yet. I sometimes I like to get involved with this, the outcome of first drives. New Orleans, like a field goal attempt +4, 4-1, not bad. If as we think it's going to be slow, we think the red zone could be a problem. So I don't usually take stuff like this. But if I had to bet on everything, I'd be looking more towards those field goals and stuff like that. Again, this is a pretty short board right now because the game is 2 days away, so more props will be popping up. So that's how I look at it from a betting standpoint. Let's look at it from a fan standpoint. I've been rambling about betting enough. That's kind of the betting analysis there. So from a fan standpoint, from a Who Dat Nation standpoint, what I want is pretty simple. What I want is more of what we saw in London, more of what we saw in that setting, because I think the Saints looked pretty good. A lot of people were shitting on the Saints, but I thought they looked pretty lively. I thought Andy Dalton was pretty good. He looked better to me than Jameis. I want to see Skrmetta. I want to see how healthy he is. We'll know more. It's Friday when I'm doing this at 5 o'clock, so we'll know a little bit more come game time. But if Skrmetta suits up, if he plays, if he's not limited, then I want to see him getting involved, and I want to see what he looks like with a full workload. I want to see how healthy is he. What's he look like running the ball? How are they going to get him involved passing-wise? I do want to see more Taysom Hill. I want to see a little bit of Taysom sprinkled in there. Let's see what Taysom did in London. I know he ran the ball a little bit. We talked about before the London game, we talked about show me creativity, right? Show me a pulse. Show me creativity. Get Taysom involved. Get these receivers involved. At the time, we talked about getting Skrmetta involved, but he was a game-time scratch. Yeah, so Taysom ran the ball 5 times. Show me that. Show me. We don't have Latavius Murray here, so assume this is Skrmetta, like the 11-10 split's probably what it could be if Kamara's there, because you would hope Kamara's going to be utilized in the passing game a lot. Olave, a lot of people look at receptions. I like to look at targets. Target share is really important, especially when you're looking at like reception props and things like that. You also want to see, now we're kind of going on a little side thing here, but you also want to look at splits when it comes to different quarterbacks. So you can see here, this Carolina game and this Tampa game, these are Jameis Winston, right? And what's important here, this is with Michael Thomas. Okay, so with Michael Thomas, he had 3 and 3. Without Michael Thomas, all of a sudden it spikes up to 13-13, right? Then again, we're looking at 7. So those are little things that you can think about. You can also look at like games you're losing, games you're leading, things like that when it looks at player props. So I want to see just more. I just want to see more of what they showed us in London. Now I will say, I think the Saints should win this game. Last game we talked about, don't let the results upset you. Don't let the results dictate how you view the game. I think the results should dictate this game because 1, we're a heavy favorite and we should win the game. 2, we're at home. So those 2 things, good coaches and good teams win games they're supposed to win. Brian Kelly and LSU, when he got hired, I was telling a friend of mine who's a big LSU fan, I said, one of the things you'll notice about Brian Kelly is that he doesn't lose games he's not supposed to lose. He doesn't have those games where he loses to Eastern Michigan or something, or he has a, he's a 5-6 point favorite and he blows it. He usually can get his team where they need to be and get the job done. Now, when Brian Kelly's facing a top 5 team, not so much the same. But if Dennis Allen needs to, I'm okay with him losing the games in London when we're playing the Minnesota Vikings with none of our starters. I'm not okay with him losing games like this, where we're playing the Seahawks, probably a bottom 3 team in the NFL, with Geno Smith, and that's about it. We're as healthy right now, sans Michael Thomas, and again, if Skrmetta plays, we're as healthy right now as we're going to be for the rest of the year, because I think that Dalton is the better choice than Winston. So I'm not even factoring in him being injured. So you're at home. You're playing at the noon slot where you want to play. The dome is going to be rocking. You've got weapons. You kind of hit a stride last game. You started to get Taysom involved. Dalton looked good. You're kind of there. You're kind of hitting this stride. I feel like this could be a get-right game for the Saints. I feel like this is one of those games that the Saints could really take over and really do some things. This is that game that you need, especially going into Cincinnati. So if they drop this game, if they drop this, I'll be very disappointed because all angles point to getting right. So I think the Saints win this game. I think they win comfortably. Again, Crown and Sprites, Bloody Marys will be flowing. I'll be in the dome. And of course, afterwards, we'll be tweeting up a storm and reviewing next week. We'll be doing all the reviews. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think the Seahawks are going to win? Do you think the Saints are going to win? Do you have a ticket? Do you have a ticket on this game? Do you have the Saints? Another thing to note here, if the line does drop to 4.5 and you're thinking about buying that hook to 4, you know, I'm usually pretty against that. I'm usually pretty against the hook, buying the hook. So, but that's something that people will do and people will think about. So be careful whenever you're manipulating the line, whether that's buying points, teasing, anything like that. Always tread lightly when you do stuff like that. So thanks again for watching, guys, and I will see you on the other side, hopefully with a Saints victory by more than 5.